Hey, welcome back to Nomad Boatbuilding. I'm Mark Rutan, and today I'm building the Catalina Wherry. We can finally install our breast hook and our quarter knees. Now, some of you might remember that we actually installed our quarter knees in an earlier episode. It worked thematically, but we're just going to zap your memory so you forget that and we get to see it all over again. So stare into the light. Welcome back to Nomad Boatbuilding. I'm Mark Rutan, and today we're going to install the breast hook and quarter knees. But more importantly, we're actually going to be installing the Inwale. And to do this, we're going to be using a technique I refer to as an expansion. Now, this is what I consider to be a foundational technique in wooden boat building. We'll talk about it in more depth when we get to it. So right now, just sit back and relax and let's get down to work. When I have really awkward shaped parts that need to get glued in, I like to pre-drill for my fastenings first, because those fastenings are going to help me clamp this in place. Of course, wherever our depth of material is limited, we want to check our fasteners and set our countersink to be the right length for those fasteners. What I like to do is set the tapered drill bit so it's about maybe 1/8 of an inch deeper than the fastener itself, and that's because the diameter of them is a little small compared to the screws. We'll have a fastener coming in through here, so here's going to be my last one here, just splitting these up. All of these, I'm driving them deep enough that I can get a plug into these holes here. Good. Do the same to the breast hook. Let's see, we'll have one coming through here. That should be good, so we'll do one here. I'll just switch to a longer bit for this screw. Yeah, okay, we'll do 2 here. Okay, now our clearance holes. Unlike steel construction screws that have a narrow shoulder and wider threads, we're using bronze screws in which the threads are cut into the blank. That leaves the shoulder heavier, and so we need to drill clearance holes in order for the parts to be drawn together properly and to avoid breaking the screw. Okay, that's ready to glue in now. All right, so leave that clamp here because we'll put that to use. You always want to make sure you pop your part out and clean off any junk that's hanging in where you drilled your holes. Don't want those hanging up, holding your joint open. Been working with using G-Flex epoxy on the oak, but it's such a pain in the butt to mix up. I really absolutely hate it. It just the resin and the hardener have like really different consistencies, so it's really hard to judge what you're doing. My little scale that I usually would use to mix up stuff like that, where I measure it out by weight, is it crapped out, and so I just don't have a scale to work with. So what I'm doing instead is I'm mixing up just enough G-Flex to wet out the oak, but then I'm using regular West System epoxy, the 105, 205 resin hardener for the rest of the joint. You can mix the two together as long as you have to catalyze them separately. So you mix up your 105, 205, you mix up your G-Flex, then you can combine them if you want, or in this case I'm using one and against the other. So they'll both cure and bond to each other just fine, but because they're a different hardener resin mix, you got to make sure that you're addressing those separately. So I just got to go down and I got to wet out the transom area, and then we'll thicken this up and we'll put the breast hook in. Now you might be wondering why I'm using G-Flex in conjunction with regular epoxy here, and that's because West System specifically doesn't really recommend using the regular epoxy with white oak. And that's because white oak has an expansion and contraction rate that kind of fights with the epoxy. You can do it, and they outline techniques for making that a more reliable result. The simple workaround is using their G-Flex epoxy product, and that is what they refer to as a toughened epoxy. It's basically more flexible and hangs on to troublesome woods more effectively, like oak and oily tropical woods. In our case, we're using the G-Flex to create a layer that hangs onto the oak nicely, but we're using the regular epoxy thickened to hang on to the plywood. And between the two, we're going to get a nice bomb-proof joint. All right. Just let it squeeze that way. All right, now the epoxy should lubricate the screws. You popping off. Okay, now to the stern, same thing. So tomorrow I can fair off. Well, I'll probably wait for the Inwales to go in, and then we'll do one last fairing of the whole shear line, I think. Yeah. All right. Well, that's it for the day. I'm calling it. Beer 30. Let's get an Inwale installed. Okay. So this is still overly long. Got a couple things to do here. So I'm just going to pop that down inside of the back end. More quick grips, because that ain't quick. All right. So I still need to sort of dial in this little joint back up in here. If you recall, I didn't have this blocking in place yet when I made my breast hook. So trying to fudge in this line is my first order of business. So there's a few different ways I can do that. Now let's start by just popping this down out of the way. So using a light batten here. We can use a light batten to help work out a lot of details. We want one that's not too soft. We want it to have enough stiffness that it sort of mimics the actual Inwale a little bit. Using one that's made out of ash here, which I think is sort of a good choice for this. So I want to try and bring this in such a way that it mimics the actual Inwale. I'm trying to find the point at which this can still follow the curve. I almost want a piece of this blocking. Do I have one kicking around still? There we go. So if I stick a piece of the same material up here, this does a good job of sort of mimicking where this line needs to go. Just draw that in. Okay. Now we go at it with chisels for a bit. So I'm going to have to I've actually got the grain going in my favor for a change. I could actually use a chisel, as it's supposed to be used. I rarely get to do this. If you've been woodworking for a little while, you've probably gotten comfortable with your use of handheld power tools and maybe a couple of stationary tools. You've made some furniture and a few other projects, but you really want to up your game. I really recommend you try some wooden boat building to do that. Because wooden boat building, for the most part, is actually fairly simple. However, it demands that you think about things a little bit differently. It demands that you think about compound angles, slightly more complicated joinery perhaps, but more importantly, it demands that you get comfortable with using hand tools. Hand planes, chisels, scrapers, even rasps. And most importantly, you really have to learn how to sharpen those tools to a razor's edge so that you can do the work that needs to be done. The thing you need to be willing to do is abandon machines as a primary tool for shaping things. I have this little technique where I'll take one of these sticks here and I'll bend it down so that the handle's riding against the thing that I'm trying to sand something to be adjacent to. Of course, you get the thickness of the sandpaper, which throws it off by hair, so it's just a way of just trying to dial in both the angle and the attitude. Okay, some clamps on here. We're getting real close. I gotta dial it in a little more here. I love this. This is called a dragon rasp. It's just a hand cut rasp. This one's Chinese made, I believe. I got it from Stuart McDonald, the Luthier Supply. There's also nice French ones, and they're not cheap. You're probably, even for this Chinese one, it's probably about 75 bucks for it or something like that. But boy, they really work beautifully. It's looking pretty good. Yep, okay, well, let's drive this home and get the final fitting happening here. I think I need to just do a little, you know what it is I need? What it is I need, interestingly enough, it's this one that is almost just a bit too flat. Yeah, that made a difference right there. Okay, we're going to drive it forward and then we'll do fit the end cut there. Alright, with this end butted up tight now, I can just do a few curvings to get it 100%. One more. That looks good. Happy with that. All right, that'll all go together nicely. So this is done. Now we'll just make sure we're clamped up nicely, working our way down towards the end, and then we'll fit the other end now. Okay, now we're going to start by doing the same thing here. Bend the batten into place. Just use a couple of clamps. And I'm pretty darn close already. In fact, I think I'm close enough that I don't even really need to draw a line. I mean, I could. What I'll do is this. I'll just try and swing this up and get the alignment the same, and just use the edge of this as a guide to try and pencil in a bit of a line. So we did a little bit, and then we get the batten out and we check our progress. I think the way I sort of designed this was going to sort of straighten out a bit back here. Yeah. check the joint for square. Be a little more square. All right, now for my length. So I take my same tick stick here, and I've got this angle marked on here. Yes, it's almost exact. You can just use a single pointer too, so I could just flip it over, and so that I've got a very accurate single point. In fact, I'll do that. I'm just going to clamp this in place so it's sprung to the shape of the shear here. I'm going to come all the way back until the very last position. Squeeze this guy down here, and so back here where the inwale is all sprung to shape, we're going to mark it back here. So up here it still isn't sprung to shape, and I'm marking it at the back of this little batten. Okay, now I can take this and I can just lift it out so it just springs straight. And with it springing straight, as close to it as can be, I think it's a little bit higher, yeah. So I'm going to come back here and I'm just going to clamp this little stick right onto the top of the inwales, the same spot it was, or I could even clamp it to I can flip it over and clamp it to the back side too, right where this stick made its line, its intersection line. So what we're doing right with this little batten is what's referred to as an expansion. That is, we're taking a line that's wrapping around a curve, marking its length as it lays along a curve, and then we're flattening it out so that we can lay it on the stock that we're working with and get a true length. Now what I'm doing here using a little short batten is basically a hack. It saves us a bunch of time. We're not making a full-length pattern. Our inwale itself is providing the bulk of our pattern. We just need to be able to figure out exactly where the ends land. And so that's why we're marking both ends of this little batten onto the inwale itself. Now where we might use a technique like this in a broader sense is when we're doing our lofting, and for instance we've got a keelson that's running along the curve of our keel and we want to build that to go into our finished boat. So we would take a batten, we would wrap it around the keelson in our lofting, we would mark both ends, and then we'd take it off the lofting and we'd flatten it out and lay it on our stock that our keelson's going to be made out of, and that will give us a true length of our keelson, so that when we go and bend that onto the mold, we've already got our finished length. So that sort of thing occurs in many places throughout a boat building process, and so that's why I refer to it as a foundational technique. We use it in different variations all the time. And then coming along, just make sure we're tight to it. And then I mark this point, which is marking this point here. So now I've got an accurate point to follow. And I want to work a little bit on the outside of that. So just to give myself some wiggle room, I want to be able to curve this in place. So now I just pick up my bevel here, square to the back side of the inwale. I'll mark it off onto my stock. And you recall we already did this square, so I can mark that square across here if I want. I can do it on the back side. I usually do it on the back side where I'm seeing it. We'll do it on both. And now we just want to cut to this line, or cut just a little bit proud of that line. So we want to put some sort of backing under here so I don't hit the boat itself. I'll just drop a sanding stick under there. I'll just clamp that so it's not wiggling around on me. And I'm going to cut to the outside of this line by just under a 1/16. Cutting off a long whippy thing in place is something I do quite often in wooden boat building, mostly because it's a lot of trouble to remove something from the boat and try and clamp it up on a bench, which might be cluttered up with things. So I'll cut stuff in place, either, as you saw me, just throwing a little bit of blocking underneath the thing I want to cut, or I'll try and be a little bit more elaborate like I am here, using this little stick as a kind of an outrigger. Now, of course, you have to be careful you don't slip with your saw and blast it into your rub rail that you've already taken the time to shape. But maybe it offers some slightly better ergonomics and helps you to get more accurate results.
Get rid of that.
Now I know this isn't going to fit perfectly because I cut it long. But what we'll do is we'll come down here. We'll try and spring this into shape here because we want to take up all of our slack. Now I got a big gap here. Or rather, too tight, so I'm going to be kerfing this in. I'd like to put something in here just to hold this joint open a hair. So we'll see what we've got lying around. It can be anything really, as long as it allows the joint to almost touch. So there I'm just using a screw. So if I don't do that, my joint is just going to collapse down onto my saw and bind it.
Okay, that's getting better. I think I could do that one more time. I need a stir stick or something thinner. Let's see, will this work? Yeah. Okay.
That didn't work out too bad. The geometry was screwing with me a little bit, and my joint's tight at the front, but actually kind of loose at the back. There's nothing I can really do about that now unless I start tapering this thing out. I'm not going to do that. We're just going to let it go. It's going to fill with glue. It's unfortunate that it's not 100%. In fact, I'm actually tempted. You know what I'm going to kerf it one more time. It's going to leave it open, but at least it'll leave it open in such a way that the glue line will look consistent. Get a smaller saw, see if that can help us. I'm having to get up on my tiptoes here to try and get high enough to even do this is the problem.
That's a bit better.
Do it one more time with a heavier blade.
There we go.
All right, it'll look consistent at the very least now.
All right. So the only thing left to do is actually fasten it in, glue it in. We're going to glue it we'll glue it and clamp it, and then tomorrow we'll come back and we'll throw ring nails in here, I think, to hold it all together, or just to back up the glue joint. What have I got? Yeah, got these guys. They should work pretty good. Maybe I'll throw a screw in like every third one or something like that. Maybe we'll do a screw at the frames, ring nails everywhere else. Something, I think, yeah, I don't know, something like that. That'll work out okay. Of course, riveting would be the traditional thing, but I don't think we're going to do that. So after this is all glued in, I'm going to be doing a little bit of cleanup here to dial in the end of our breast hook shape, because it's standing a bit proud. You could actually leave that too. You could always do a little cork on here. It could be a little finishing detail. You do either a little bead, or you just round it over to a soft shoulder. You can do either one of those. I might just do that just for simplicity's sake. Okay, our Inwale is fitted in place and it's ready to get glued in. So we're going to save that for the next episode, and I hope you'll join me for that. Now remember, these videos are made possible due to the support from my followers on Patreon. So if you would like to help support these videos, please consider joining me over on Patreon. You can find links in the corner, or down in the street, or down in that thing. Okay, until next time, folks. Catch you later.